Hello, sorry, good afternoon to everyone. This is Ramon Marrades saying hi to you from Berlin and welcoming today to our third seminar organized together by Placemaking Europe and the city of The Hague. After two discussions that we had already, the first one on placemaking and health and well-being, the second one on placemaking and mobility, we are today diving in on the question of the relationship between placemaking and climate action. And as we have done in the other discussions, we will have a couple of international experts and a case of the city of The Hague that we want to discuss together. You also, some of the attendees, the ones that are working in The Hague, have the opportunity in an hour after the seminar also to join a real life event to develop further on the discussion that has been happening today. So we really also looking forward to this and really believe that this combination of an online international discussion and a local deep dive could work very well to build like common ideas and projects. And today we'd like to welcome, as I said, a case study of The Hague, a case study of the city of Belfast, and also an international reflection by international expert. So today we will have representing the city, the policy officer and project leads under resilience team at the municipality of The Hague, Jesse van Velsen. Then also we would like to welcome Moura Quigley, Royal Town Planning Institute Northern Ireland, the chair of the Royal Town Planning Institute Northern Ireland, that will bring us the recent insights of the policies that the city of Belfast has been developing lately. And finally, we also have Stefan, that even he's talking to us from New York today. He's a Dutch architect, internationally known also about his reflection of green and blue infrastructure, and recently also published an amazing book on tall buildings. So we, as we did the last time, we are going to hear from all three of them initial reflection of a case and the topic, and after that we'll have time to discuss and develop further and also have a discussion among the speakers. And you are very welcome to post questions at any time. We'll be tracking the chat at real time. I will bring those questions to the speakers, and we hope to finish on time and sharp as we normally do. Our team today, I'm joined by Olga, Julia, and Alice. I hope joining from our office in Amsterdam that will be managing the tech and also taking care of tracking the chat. So welcome everyone. We'll start with the reflection from Jesse.
Steden staan voor ingewikkelde uitdagingen. Energieprijzen stijgen, de wereld wordt steeds digitaler en eenzaamheid onder ouderen en jongeren neemt toe. De sociale ongelijkheid groeit, het klimaat verandert en het weer wordt extremer. En COVID-19 heeft pijnlijk blootgelegd hoeveel impact een crisis heeft op onze manier van leven. Willen we deze uitdaging het hoofd bieden, dan zullen we als steden sterk, weerbaar en verkrachtig moeten zijn. En dat vraagt om een andere manier van werken en samenwerken. Met elkaar, met bewoners en met partners in de stad. Daarom is Den Haag in 2016 toegetreden tot het wereldwijde Resilient Cities Network. Een samenwerkingsverband van steden die innovatieve ideeën, kennis en oplossingen delen om de stedelijke veerkracht en weerbaarheid te vergroten. En hier, in de Noorderbeek-Dwarsstraat, is het Resilience Team samen met het stadsdeel Zegbroek van Den Haag een nieuwe proef gestart. Dit is een typisch Haagse straat die van alles heeft. Koophuizen, huur en sociale huur. Jaren 30 woningen en nieuwbouw. Een basisschool en een verzorgingstehuis. Een straat met 2 pleinen. Ondernemers en met een wijklab waar bewoners elkaar kunnen ontmoeten. In de eerste maanden van 2022 hebben we met de bewoners in de straat gesproken. Dat deden we buiten op straat bij een koffiekar, maar ook binnen bij bewoners thuis. In totaal hebben we meer dan 100 gesprekken gevoerd, waarbij vragen centraal stonden zoals: wat tast jouw veerkracht aan? Hoe kunnen we als gemeente en bewoner beter samenwerken? En hoe zorgen we er samen voor dat de straat toekomstbestendiger wordt? Door deze gesprekken werden al snel duidelijk wat de belangrijkste thema's waren. Veiligheid, mobiliteit, energie, klimaat en de sociale verbinding. Deze thema's kun je echter niet los van elkaar zien, maar moeten integraal bekeken worden. Samen met de bewoners van de straat hebben we een verklaring ondertekend om hiermee aan de slag te gaan. en om zo de veerkracht van de straat te vergroten. Op 12 maart klonk vervolgens het startschot, een braderie op de pleinen in de straat. En tot en met eind juni gaan we aan de slag met bewoners om gericht interventies toe te passen die de veerkracht van de straat integraal vergroten. Zo is er in de afgelopen maanden bij bewoners al meer dan 220 meter aan geveltuin aangelegd. En zijn er met de school en het verzorgingstehuis ambities voor een volgende stap van vergroening. Ook vinden er nu 2 keer per week op de pleinen sportklassen plaats. En werken bewoners samen met de politie om de veiligheid van de straat te vergroten. Om de komende interventies en toekomstige initiatieven te stimuleren, hebben we een zeecontainer neergezet op een van de pleinen. Deze container is omgebouwd tot een kantoor. De komende maanden kunnen bewoners hier terecht om ideeën te delen voor bewonersinitiatieven in de buitenruimte. Daarnaast kunnen zij hier in de weekenden terecht om direct hun huis te laten isoleren, brand- en koolstofmonoxidemelders te installeren of om informatie te verkrijgen over subsidies voor verduurzaming en vergroening. De komende tijd gaan we nog hard aan de slag. Vervolgens evalueren we en monitoren we de uitkomsten. Is de straat veerkrachtiger geworden? En nog belangrijker, wat hebben we geleerd van deze intensieve manier van samenwerken met bewoners en partners? Wat zegt dat over onze eigen werkwijze? Deze uitkomsten delen we met collega's, partners en ons internationale netwerk en vormen hopelijk de basis voor nieuwe, integrale en effectieve samenwerkingsvormen. Een succesvolle samenwerking die niet 1, niet 2, maar meerdere uitdagingen tegelijkertijd aanpakt om steden veerkrachtiger en weerbaarder te maken.
Thank you for this. This is an amazing video. I think we are already seeing one of the main issues that we are discussing today, which is the human dimension and the social dimension of climate action and resilience. And this is particularly and precisely where the connections between climate action and placemaking is happening. So thanks for this. It couldn't be better explained. And now we are going to travel to Belfast, and you're just going to explain us which are the recent insights of their climate action strategy linked to the human, social side, and public space, of course.
There are 3 key levers in terms of the Belfast Resilience Strategy. The first is around climate adaptation. The second lever is around participation of children and young people. And then the third lever of the resilience strategy is around a connected net zero emissions economy. So coming out of those 3 kind of cross-cutting levers for the resilience strategy were a number of resilience projects, some, quite strategic and require the coordination and linking up of central government, some much more bottom up in terms of giving power and agency to citizens and giving them quite a high stake in how we develop and build on that resilience going forward. So we have projects like the Million Trees project for Belfast, where we are trying to green our city. It's a very concrete city as a result of years of infrastructure development in the 70s that sort of removed a lot of the green spaces, and actually we now have a lot on the periphery but none in the centre. So it's about greening the city and creating more green space. We also have a programme around sustainability and food. So it's about learning from other cities, about nature-based solutions for improving health and well-being, for creating greater sustainability, for increasing biodiversity across the city and making that kind of wider system across the city work for the future and building that wider sustainability. As I mentioned, we've given young people a climate platform and they're very active in shaping the strategy going forward. We developed through our universities, who we work very closely with, a programme called Architects for Change. So that really is placing a lot of leadership in the hands of students and young designers to come up with innovative solutions for the city. We also, in terms of a few strategies that have actually led to real bottom-up action, include things like a bolder vision for Belfast, and that was in response to a major fire in the city centre a few years ago that really highlighted the lack of resilience of our city centre. And so this bolder vision now is coming forward and it's collaborating across government, but it's also delivering place-based solutions for greening, for connecting, and for using underutilized sites in the city. So we have a huge number of gap sites and derelict sites. We also integrate our resilience strategy with a program that is funded by the EU called Peace, and it is about integrating our community. So making sure our housing developments are not segregated anymore. But to do that, we need to work from the bottom with communities and break down some of those social barriers they see to actually working, living, and being educated together. And so some of my former colleagues that Placemaking Europe have worked with have developed some lovely, really beautiful projects around working with local neighbourhoods and streets in developing kids' ideas around how their places can be made better, injecting more colour onto their streets and making them design the actual pieces of artwork and pieces of placemaking interventions that actually go into some of these derelict sites and a lot of these interface sites, as we would call them, that sit between some of these communities that have largely been left and ignored for several decades. So it's about using those shared spaces and building those shared spaces together, but putting the ownership of them in the hands of the communities and making them determine what happens with them going forward. So we delivered a beautiful project in USI called Bright Ideas, which was about kids coming up with bright ideas for their neighbourhood and having events and festivals and community days in some of these spaces to really poke and probe and ideate around what these spaces could be and how they could serve their community better. One project that I've been involved in that really embedded placemaking, and it is through the Boulder vision for Belfast, is one called Relink, and it is about removing the barriers, the psychological barriers, but also the physical barriers within a city centre interface, which was basically a road that was built in the 70s to divide and segregate and keep conflict to a minimum in the city. But we're now dealing with huge health implications of that segregation. We're dealing with struggling services because those places are no longer able to support two separate schools because the kids are still educated in two separate schools. So, but you have to start from the very bottom up. And for us, it was about the bridges across that road, connecting those communities back together and connecting them back into the city centre. So whilst we did do a huge amount of strategic alignment from the UN Sustainable Development Goals right down to new development plans for the city and the Boulder Vision, we really went out to those communities and got them to ideate and come up with solutions of how they would connect better with their neighbours and what kinds of things would make the places greener, make them more playful, make them better lit and safer, and also to reduce some of that psychological negative connotations on the space. So we talk a lot in Belfast around the broken windows theory and really how places that have become neglected and unloved and territorialized with barbed wire and fences and gates really do play on the physical and mental health of citizens that live around there. So we went into schools and we worked very closely with each of those different groups. We brought them together. We developed games. We were on the streets playing games with them around what their places could be. And they came up with some really innovative, beautiful solutions for what they wanted those bridges to be for them and how they could add to their area rather than act as a barrier or a separation to their communities. And we are fortunate in that we are now have received the funding and are delivering a series of green bridges along this road over in the summer of 2022 that are really characteristic of what those communities wanted for their area. But will also tackle real deep-rooted city issues of resilience, such as air quality. We have 1 in 14 people in this city, as recorded by the Centre for Cities, are dying from poor air quality. We also have congestion and a dominance of cars because we have designed around the car for far too long. So whilst these are very basic placemaking projects, they're trying to tackle multiple challenges and multiple problems that will in themselves kind of contribute to that wider city resilience, but also working with those communities are building their understanding of what they think is important for their place. And they are the ones that know best. It's building their capacity and ability to deal with future challenges that will be thrown upon them. And it also allowed them, what we saw during COVID was it allowed them to see the importance, to understand that they actually didn't have enough green space in their area and they needed more. And they really advocated and pushed for more greenery and more beauty in there, and more playfulness and more colour and places that weren't just pushing cars and clogging up their streets, but actually places they could play and come together as communities. So that's one example of something that we've delivered, right from the very strategic down to on the ground placemaking that is contributing to that wider strategy and vision for building the city's resilience over time.
Thank you, Mute, very, very much. That's very inspiring. And actually, if I have to be honest, one of the things that I love about the series, about like generally like placemaking, placemaking, sharing spaces like this one, is that we are also learning from cities that are doing great, but normally they are not on the spotlight or the central spotlight of urban policies. We are learning from Pontevedra, we are learning from Belfast, we are learning a lot from The Hague as well. And I think it like makes this sharing much more valuable, that going beyond this super famous media experience like the ones in Paris, etc. And we're just learning very grounded, specific approaches from different cities around Europe. And I find it very, very valuable, because one of the things that we know is that there is no one size fits all for this kinds of challenges. There are no silver bullet solutions. So seeing this very grounded, anchored initiative, it is very inspiring. Again, we are learning a lot. We're learning a lot from Belfast, but you already mentioned the importance of nature-based solutions, giving leadership to young students, the importance of tackling the issues for communities that are left behind. And for me, that is one crucial element that you shared, that climate change is not something that it's happening in the future. There are communities, especially communities that are left behind, that are suffering their effects right now. And it's particularly also with these communities that we can tackle multiple challenges. So thank you for being so inspiring. And now let's move to the international perspective of Stefan, that knowing his work, I'm 100% sure that he's going to bring us a lot of perspective that will be connecting many dots that have shown up in the discussion already. So please, Olga, play Stefan video, and after that, looking forward very much to discuss with every panelist about what we have recently seen.
We talk about introducing blue and green infrastructure, but before we talk about that, I think we should acknowledge that in a way we're reintroducing blue and green infrastructure, because if we look at the process of urbanization in the last century, it's really been at the cost of the environment, right? So we've been paving over streams, we've been embanking on rivers, we've been cutting down trees, and we now realize that was probably a mistake. So we're reintroducing kind of blue and green infrastructure, because we realize that nature has very important benefits for us. Now, how do we do it? I think that's the key question, and it varies across contexts. And if you look globally, there's various ways of doing it, and it really depends on the context and also the problem at hand. I'll start with maybe one obvious one, which is looking at kind of city policy, right? If you can change city policy to include green infrastructure or nature into the city, then you can really make a systemic shift. So I think policy is a really good system, because it and forces kind of new development or even existing development to become blue or green. The second I would say is tax incentives. And again, this really varies on the context, but speaking as someone who's currently in the United States, a lot of it is more market driven. So how can you introduce green or blue infrastructure? It's through maybe giving people tax deductions that are replacing their roofs with green roofs, or that are replacing their asphalt with green turf. The other thing I've been seeing in particularly like larger cities is like city restoration projects. So we're seeing this in Latin America, for instance, but also in Europe. But perhaps the most famous example is Seoul, the Cheongwon River Restoration Project, right? So here we had a river that was urbanized. They built a highway on top of it. And the city decided that, let's take this highway down and bring back the river. And it solved a lot of issues, including flooding, increasing the quality of the air, increasing the health of residents. There was about a 50% reduction of people with kind of air pollution related health issues, but also reducing the temperature because of this kind of green infrastructure and the evaporative cooling that stems from plants and trees. So again, it's a very good example of a kind of larger scale intervention of, how do we restore these rivers so that they can provide us with benefits again. The fourth solution, which is one that I've really focused on, is on integrated solutions of kind of multifunctional buildings or multifunctional parks. So think about Rotterdam, for instance, and the Dog Park, right? Which is a building, but it's also a dike. It is a park. It includes parking. It includes retail, all in one single entity. And I think these kind of integrated solutions work or can work really well, because you solve multiple problems with one, and one issue could cross-subsidize the other, right? In this case, the real estate could help fund some of the larger public infrastructure improvements of, let's say, enlarging a dike. And finally, the last solution is about the Noorderbeek Dwarsstraat, which is a more smaller scale community-based solution in which you really emphasize on kind of community engagement and having the community work together as a kind of stakeholder, with focused on these kind of smaller scale projects that can have a really big and tangible benefit. And I thought the Noorderbeek Dwarsstraat was a really, really good example of this. So we usually don't connect infrastructure with placemaking and the public realm. And I think that's a mistake, because infrastructure can be quite harmful on the fabric of communities, because it can really disrupt places. So think about kind of the classic examples, like a seawall that's kind of cutting off a community from the ocean, right? And many people choose to have a view of the ocean or want to be close to the ocean. So when we put infrastructure in place that blocks people, that could be really harmful. It can also be harmful for biodiversity, right? If we think about gray infrastructure and cement and concrete, these are quite hostile environments for other species. So by integrating kind of the public realm and placemaking, not only do we kind of reduce some of these harmful effects, we can actually improve the quality of the public realm of the city. And I think that's where placemaking comes in. In a way, it's, when you're a citizen, you don't really care about who's managing what, right? All you care about is having a great street that feels safe, is resilient and beautiful. So I think by integrating it with placemaking, you can really create kind of this kind of positive momentum for cities, and give residents and citizens a true benefit, right? By improving the infrastructure of the city, you're also improving the public realm. So it's really a win-win for everyone. What is the advice for The Hague? I think if you look across, case studies, there seems to be like kind of the three multis, right? And I think The Hague is already doing this to some extent. But one is that a good project or kind of a good strategy should be multi-stakeholder, right? So it should include not only kind of the city departments, but also the housing or corporations, the developers, and most importantly, the community, because the community has local knowledge. They know things that the city may not know. At the same time, they have local resources, and most importantly, you need the community for the long-term success to get buy-in for this particular project. Now, the second is about something that is multi-purpose, right? So having kind of a resilient strategy that hits several problems with one project, with one solution. So, a beautiful example was in the case of The Hague and the Noorderbeek-Dwarsstraat was having these gardens, right? These gardens in which the local community collaborated, like school children, nursery home, and the local residents. So through that collaboration process, they built kind of social capital, increased the connectivity and kind of community bonds within the neighborhood. And we know now that this has many benefits. If you look at the resilience dividend by Judy Ronan, it talks about how perhaps the most important factor for resilience plays for people to be able to bounce back from shock is these kind of community bonds. But secondly, there's other problems this solves as well. It's not just beautiful, these gardens. They also help reduce the temperature during times of heat. They help increase the air quality. They help with kind of stormwater catchment and kind of reduce the pressure on the stormwater system and help reduce floods. So we're seeing one single project, a very simple project, just a bunch of gardens that really are doing so much for that neighborhood. And then the third is multidisciplinary. So we tend to think in silos when we're thinking about city management, right? We have stormwater management, we have urban planning, we have Department of Buildings. But really, if we want to get to these kind of multi-purpose, multi-stakeholder solutions, we also need to think multidisciplinary, meaning, architects should collaborate with landscape architects, with city planners, with engineers, with hydrology specialists, with all these different disciplines that typically kind of tend to work more in isolation. So those are the 3 M's, and I hope that The Hague will continue to work with them. And then the third, the advice for the Noorderbeek-Dwarsstraat is, I think there's a lot of valuable lessons that they had, and I would suggest they do some sort of a debriefing session and figure out what worked well here. And how can we scale this to other places, right? How can this be a model for other places? Recognizing that, other places are going to be different, right? So what is the process by which other places can also get to these very good results?
Thank you very much, Stefan. Now I call every panelist to turn their cameras and microphones on so we can start the discussion. Thank you so much, and I really, really, really like Stefan, like the clarity on how you explain this approach of how to face climate action from the perspective of placemaking, and also I think it links very well also the 2 dimensions placemaking has to face, which is also like the short-term, lighter, quicker, cheaper, immediate improvements of city life and city well-being, but at the same time being constantly thinking about creating better future and solving the long-term challenges. So thanks for this. I will start, like you made already a nice reflection about the case of The Hague, but also heard Mute explaining how Belfast is approaching those issues. So I would like you to make like maybe an initial reflection of what you have recently heard.
Yeah, well, thank you for the invitation. And I should say I'm so inspired also to hear the case of Belfast. What's interesting to me is that there is already so much kind of embedded knowledge in both of these places. And, you know, we're always talking about lack, right? There's things that are not good enough, but it just struck me when Moira was talking about how, you know, a lot of Belfast was designed around the car. We don't really talk about that in the case of The Hague, but a lot of Dutch cities, they're really not designed around the car, right? Because there was a deliberate move away from that, and to promote bike lanes and have the woonerf, right? The woonerf for the shared spaces. And so I would say, please, you know, spend some time with your colleagues in The Hague, and you'll find there's a lot of lessons for Belfast there. And for the people in The Hague, I should say, you know, spend lots of time in Belfast, because what I heard was really quite exciting, and particularly how you have this combination of this long-term, more strategic approaches that, you know, take a long time and that can really, you know, tire people waiting for change, but combining that with these very short-term bottom-up approaches that included the local community, including youth and students and children, and having them decide on the vision for their streets or spaces and these green bridges. And I think that combination really works well, because you can have these kind of short-term successes that build momentum for this kind of larger strategic implementation. So yeah, I'm really excited to have Belfast and The Hague come together, because there are a lot of lessons and good things they can learn from another.
Excellent. Thanks for that. Now, like Jesse, I wanna to do also like a bit of reflection about what you listened and building back from Stefan's reflections. I also like we have to acknowledge that you are also part of the Resilience Network. So it's also a very interesting international network where you are sharing with a bunch of cities which are the new practice around resilience and climate action. So couple of questions, reflection of Mura's Stefan approach, but as well, like how do you see the link between the general worldwide discussion on resilience and what we are discussing from the placemaking side?
Yeah, thank you, Ramon. Well, first of all, thank you all for being here, and thank you for inviting me. Well, to start, being part in the Resilient Cities Network, of course, The Hague, I am relatively new to the team, but being relatively new always also gives me the space and maybe I can still be astonished about what's happening and what's happening around us. And when we started this project, we had no idea what kind of conclusions we would draft up with. And when we were going to the street, we got a good tour from our colleagues at the city part that are doing great work in the area, and also gave us the street to experiment with. And from there, I basically started to see a lot of things, like how we are, and predominantly what the most important conclusion what I've learned so far is the way we work together. And the way we work together means internally in our own system, but also how we work together with our inhabitants in the street itself. And being there for a few months now in the street, I can see more and more and more of the trust building between the inhabitants and the city part and us as a municipality as well, which makes us be able to create bigger and bigger steps every single time. So we'll be also very curious to go into a deeper conversation with you, Mura, to also talk about how you did this in Belfast and what kind of approach you use to build this trust with the inhabitants, and after create some sort of placemaking kind of initiatives. Because it's a big process with a lot of variables in there and a lot of themes and intersectionalities in there. So it is difficult, but it's definitely fun trying to experiment with it all.
Yes, Mira.
Yeah, you know, I'm absolutely inspired and taken by the sort of shared sharing and coming together of minds today on what is happening in different parts of the world. I think, Jesse, I mean, a similar situation for myself. I'm moving from working within a placemaking design studio into the municipality, the council soon. And so that shift, and I hope that shift in mindset and the fresh ideas that I can bring to that team and that thinking will really, I think that's really important, and important for the whole concept and theory of resilience, is that we are connecting and sharing across sectors, between community, within community, but also with our local governments. I think what really stood out for me from your talk was about that cooperation, and it really starting from just having a conversation. And I think that's absolutely key. Having a conversation, and what we tried to do in Belfast was just have a climate conversation, and that was so revealing about what people loved about their place, what people feel strongly about their place, and what they care about, and beautifully, you know, even from Stefan, from your talk, we found in Belfast that people really cared about the river. It's what the city was named after, and actually it flows underneath that bridge. So people really want that brought back up to the fore. And there's a lot of work being done here to try and integrate our land or water management strategies, and really by thinking of the city as a landscape instead of, you know, a built form, and thinking about how people live in that landscape and what they cherish and love about that landscape, I think can be very powerful in terms of in terms of caring and you know, valuing our green and blue infrastructure again the way we should do. So yeah, really inspired. I think the what you also mentioned, Stefan, about the silo working is very true here. I mean, we celebrate our wins, but we also recognize our challenges, and we also have huge siloed working. But it is about having the people in the room, or those conversations that cross over from health to climate to, you know, economy to flood management. That's, I think, where the magic happens, and that's where the innovation happens in terms of finding creative and solutions that are going to last and work for each of our cities, and the Hague and for Belfast. So yeah, I'm really inspired and interested in the connections and what we've shared today. I think it is about trust and building the capacity to adapt. So for me, and to bring it back to the kind of placemaking dimension, it's the human dimension of all that that's really key. And, you know, some of the inspiring projects that are out there, we can see them now, we can learn from them, just like this network is doing. So it's about that idea of being ambitious. And, you know, where I'm from, we talk about, oh, don't be too ambitious. We can't really afford to do that. We can't really afford the big things. But actually, you know, in the age that we're in now, we can't really afford not to do it. And we have to start somewhere. So starting small, but having that big vision, I think is absolutely key. And I think both cities and examples from across the world are showing that time and time again.
Thanks for this. I think like we are nailing it, no? When posting the questions, how do we work together? And we are, I guess that also we are learning that it's a never-ending process, that as inclusionists, no, there is not a moment that we can say, okay, we are working together at 100% and that's solved. It's something that we are continually learning. And there is one element that didn't completely show up in your interventions, but I'm curious about the reflection, which also about the involvement of private sector. Stefan was mentioning, okay, how important policies and tax incentives are, but and now that we discuss about how to involve the community, particularly some underserved communities, Miura, Jesse, how do you see the involvement in the private sector in this particular discussion?
Yeah, it's been really fascinating for us because we have a huge agenda to re-inhabit our city centre. For many years, it was uninhabited because of the Troubles. And they're key to unlocking a lot of the solutions and building the resilience for our city is to get, I believe it's 66,000 more people living in our city centre by 2035, which is a huge ask and a huge challenge, but it involves cooperation across all sectors, particularly private investors and those that want to invest in our city long term. So for me, and why I'm really keen to kind of move into that, the resilience and climate unit within our council, is because the private sector has a big big part to play in financing and investing in place longer term. And I think by creating beautiful places and places that are built to last and that people love and cherish, I think you do financially see a greater return on investment longer term, and it moves away from that model we have here of that kind of property development cycle that we are stuck in, and looking to those who really want to invest in our city, who have a stake in our city and want to be there to see it thrive. But what's been really lovely through our Relink project is the publicity that we gained through it has enabled and kind of got our Chamber of Commerce really, really passionate, and it was their number one priority in their kind of response back to some of the strategies and policies that are coming out from city government. So there is that economic focus, and they recognise how by bringing more green space into the city centre, by bringing more people to live in the city centre, you're creating a more resilient and adaptable kind of place that the people want to live in, and that is good for business and it's good for investment as well. So it's rethinking how the economy of the city centre is, and giving time to those people who really are invested in that longer term.
Exactly. Yeah, I do fully agree. And to also add a little bit extra to that is also like with all the transitions cities are facing now across the entire world. But if you look at the energy transition, the green transition, the social transition, digital transition, it are so many difficult and various themes that enhance each other or can even create a problem or a challenge even bigger, that we cannot do it alone. We need to work together basically with our citizens, but also with each other in our departments, falling back on the silo structures Stefan already mentioned, and also with our private sector. We have to basically redesign or resketch the way we can work together and how we can communicate best practices with each other and then implement them industry level or implement them even on a bigger level if can be, but it all all starts with a bit of trust between each other and between citizens and the municipality, but also within the municipality with colleagues, but also to the private sector, which we need to involve.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Jesse. Stefan, any reflection on the role of private sector?
Yeah, I mean, well, speaking from the United States here, that's really crucial. So what, for instance, New York City does is that they encourage development that creates public benefits, like public plazas or transit improvements, and they do that through incentives. So they let developers, let's say, build a couple extra stories. In exchange, they would have to build or put money in a special fund to promote transportation improvements or public space improvements. So obviously that makes a lot of sense for a city like New York, which is more market-led, in which the government decided to outsource some of the things that cities traditionally do, like public space. But that's not to say that something like that can work in Europe as well, right? And so if you, for instance, have a kind of a larger development parcel and you're lacking the budget to maintain or establish a public space or maybe to pay for a subway station, then you could kind of build that into the development formula so that the developer who comes in will have to pay for this. And I know in the Netherlands this happens on a more of a project by project basis. But in a place like New York, it's really quite systematic, in which they have entire areas in which they very literally say, if you do this as a developer, we give you that, right? And the hard part with these type of things is how do you maintain quality, right? Because if you do outsource it to the private sector, how do you make sure that whatever public space is being built has enough places to sit, has enough vegetation and trees, is pleasant enough for people to enjoy. So if you look at the history of New York, there was kind of a tug or like a back and forth between developers, in which developers first built kind of very sparse places that nobody really liked, but then the city came in with extra requirements. So, and gradually they lifted up the quality of these kind of privately developed kind of public spaces. So it's something that makes sense for the United States and to some extent in Europe as well.
And Stefan, I do think that we have a lot to learn from different systems to learn how they work. Let me add a couple of things that I think that are important considering this discussion, because what I've learned also in the last years is how important to have like a very clear oven compass as a strategy, no? And also that makes developers both more comfortable, but also it's more clear what things are allowed and what are not, because I guess what every city has to definitely avoid is a race to the bottom to just allow everything. I see, and it's kind of the opposite, no? And I think this is related what Mure was saying. It's acknowledging the value of the cities we live in and their heritage and how great they are, no? And sometimes like putting this public value in front, that can say that also help us to say, okay, like those are the kind of projects that fit in or not, because this is so valuable. And it's kind of the opposite that the mindsets that we have now, no? That it seems that we have to give free land or like too many like easy solutions, I said, for some developing projects to happen. So I do think that it's important to change this mindset, and cities like The Hague and Belfast are showing us how they, as I said, value their local values. Let me make a bridge with that and going back to green and blue solutions that obviously like they have also a side of private sector that has to be considered. But we have a very good question from the audience already, which is about that. And also it's about the visibility of nature and visibility of climate change. And Arno Lammers is asking, can nature-based solutions help to bring people from different social and cultural backgrounds together? So Stefan, that's mostly for you, but then obviously I'd love to hear your thoughts, Jesse.
Well, I really like the gardens at the Noorderbeek Dwarsstraat, right, in which you have these community gardens and several groups were brought together to maintain these, including the residents, the nursery home residents, and children. And I think that was, a really good example in how you can, bring people from different backgrounds and demographics together to work collaboratively on a project. When I think about, the great green spaces of the world, I see them as melting pots, right? Where people of all backgrounds, they want to be there if it's good enough, right? A place like Central Park, you have everyone from homeless to the top 0.01% of the world strolling through the park. And the reason is because it's just beautiful. I mean, it's so good that it's good enough for everyone, right? So I think that should be the bar that we should aim for when we're dealing with public space, when we're dealing with kind of green public space, is that it needs to have a certain quality. And when it does, it not only brings people together, but it also contributes to property values. And it brings in a whole range of other benefits as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't know, like before I let you, Jesse and Mura, intervene. Arno is also pointing out like this overreaching issue of gentrification, which sometimes is the elephant in the room. So how can we also avoid that increasing the quality of public space and introducing these green and blue solutions to tackle climate change can also, like these measures of increasing quality can be enjoyed by the communities that actually live there instead of being displaced. So if you could also link both topics, that would be great, Jesse.
Yeah, if you look at the project, what we're doing now, and we're still doing the project, and we're starting the evaluation of it in June, but I already can maybe give a tip of the view of one conclusion, and that is very good that Arno says this, because when we started the gardens in the street, we noticed in the first run that we did it, we only had the certain stakeholders that are always there in the street. So we had the typical families and typical neighborhood initiatives that wanted to get the garden and plant it together with it. But then it was a sort of like avalanche kind of approach, because it started buzzing in the street. We started talking with more civilians. People came outside of the door looking outside. Why are you guys creating these kind of gardens? You had an opportunity to explain the project even more. We did a second run of these gardens, and in the end, we even did a third run of these gardens. And we can see a growth in the amount of meters we place every time. And that is just because of, I think, breaking the trust. And we can also see that other people of different socioeconomic backgrounds are taking part of them, are also planting these gardens, also are now willing to maintain the gardens. I spoke with one of the neighbors who was living to a Chinese couple, just recently moved to the Netherlands 5 years ago, who now together bought a 15-meter long water hose to start watering the gardens in the neighborhood as well. So it's definitely can be used as a bridge between different people. However, it asks that for repetition, repeat, so people can start buzzing and start copying, basically.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, I think what Jesse made a really good point, and it's, for me, it's about kind of the process of which you involve people from the early stage and in the placemaking, and giving people, building their capacity and building their tools and building their skills to engage, so that you aren't just hitting the same voices all the time, but you're actually actively pulling those from the margins into the conversation. So for me, the best way to do that is engage within the spaces themselves, take away all those kind of formalities and barriers to traditional engagement in place and planning and so on. We used in Relink an inclusive design methodology, and there are many of them, but the key to it is start with a blank sheet of paper. Don't go to people with preconceived ideas and draft plans and things like that. And yeah, I just think that's really key. And someone said to me very early on in that process, if you design with the people on the margins of society and those with the greatest needs, and you design for everyone. And I think that's how you ensure that places are inclusive, and you reduce some of those kind of propensities for gentrification and designing for one particular group of people or other.
Yeah.
Thank you. We have 5 minutes left, and I'd like you as well to bring one topic into discussion connected with that, because with the 3 cities that we are talking from today, not Berlin where I am, but the other 3, New York, The Hague, and Belfast, have one common element. They are waterfront cities, they are port cities, and one of the main, those are the cities that are facing the bigger effects of climate change, where climate change is more visible and where there's more potential possibly for the sort of solutions that we are discussing. So, and actually, like what you were saying, Stefan, that great public space are the ones where every community is present, and we can see that on the waterfront of The Hague, that also have a natural side of it, which is amazing. But like, and also I know that Belfast have done very interesting efforts in the last years, also to transform the waterfront with climate action in mind. So I'd say, Stefan, Miura, couple of tips for The Hague in terms of waterfront development and climate action as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think The Hague is already doing a great job with Scheveningen and the waterfront there. That was not too long ago redone. So I think it's a great example of a beautiful waterfront that people enjoy. Obviously, there's many examples in the Netherlands. We talk about Rotterdam a lot and the multi-purpose solutions there. But yeah, no, I think the Netherlands and The Hague, they know how to make a good waterfront. So that, yeah, I think there's many cities around the world are looking at the Dutch approach to waterfront planning in the face of climate change. Absolutely, and we know that if there's one country that is leading the debate on how to live better with water and how to rethink engineering towards a more balanced relationship with the sea and water in general, it's the Netherlands. So it's a pleasure always to work with you guys. But Miura, what can we learn from the waterfront development strategy in Belfast?
Yeah, I was just trying to jot a few ideas down, but yeah, for us, our waterfront development in Belfast is still evolving and shaping and changing over time. What's been really exciting over the past couple of years is that the conditions, the kind of top-down initial kind of master planning of this big, wasteland essentially has has created a kind of loose framework for bottom-up action to really start to take shape and thrive. And I think we learned a lot over COVID of how people really are embracing the spaces. And I think the plans and how those places are developing are evolving and shaping over time. So there's been so many iterations of way of the vision and how that's being developed. So it's about that kind of flexible vision that enables and creates the conditions for all of that kind of bottom up, and those who wanting to be involved and play their part in shaping that place, you know, giving them the ability to do so and embracing that.
Thanks for that. Thanks for that. So I'd like to, Jesse, if you want to add something, but
I just want to underline Stefan's multi-purpose kind of approach, because indeed the pier in the Hague got altered, so it is, and protecting us against any rising water or storm, but also gives us more aesthetics and an area with shops to relax or eat an ice cream or just enjoy your day. So I think this multi-purpose thinking is really what needs to drive our thinking. But
I think no, you pointed out like I find it a fantastic metaphor, not to having something that is helping us to, like some device that is helping us to adapt to climate change, and at the same time you can have an ice cream on top of that. So I like having this picture in mind. I think it's a great illustration of what we are discussing. I would like the speakers to ask you for a final takeaway, just one thing that you were taking with you from this conversation, Stefan.
Yeah, no, I'm so impressed by both The Hague and Belfast. And the one thing that kind of strikes me as really special is kind of the soft skills or the human skills that both municipalities have developed. Like, how do you engage the community, right? How do you get them motivated? How do you inspire them? But also, how do you manage their expectations? How do you prevent them from being disillusioned when things take too long or are not exactly what they planned at the beginning? So in New York, for instance, we've seen how there's been a lot of workshops after Sandy, and there's been some disillusionment and fatigue by some of the residents who felt, you know, there wasn't quite the results that they were hoping for, and it took too long. So I think those soft skills and engaging with the community are extremely precious. So I think that's, for me, the key lesson of today.
Excellent. Thanks for this. Mira.
Yeah, I on a similar thread, you know, I'm really inspired by Jesse, just, you know, the example in The Hague of just start having conversations, going out and having conversations with people. I think you get inspired by projects you see that actually just do something, you know, and you can get stuck in that trap of having just conversations, but actually do the project and have a conversation around that. Do a project and, you know, talk about the space and change it as you're talking, and really kind of break down that barrier between, you know, ideating about what a place can be and then doing it, and just do it all together. So that would be my one big takeaway from some of the examples today and some of the conversations we've had.
Thanks, Jesse.
I'm actually thinking of two examples or two takeaways, if I may be a little bit naughty. One is the I actually when I hear the project Nora is also working on, I think it's very important for us to keep amazing yourself or stay amazed, like the way we're working. We can alter that, but it needs good conversations with our residents, with our inhabitants, and then let them amaze you, let them come with different kind of stories or different approaches that you haven't thought of before, and actually then start doing them, have the guts to do them basically as a city. And the second takeaway I really want to underline is that today, with different people from different countries working on the same topics, how important it is basically to keep looking each other up and learn from each other, learn from earlier projects, learn from what projects they're doing now, and the issues of the day basically can captivate us by what we're working on the daily issues, but we really need to make time to look each other up and learn from each other.
So thank you so much. I think, Jesse, that's a fantastic way to end it up. Thank you, Stefan. Thank you, Mira. Thank you, Jesse. Thank you, everyone that attended, asked very good questions, and also Alice, Julia, and Olga, the team behind the scenes making that work. Thank you very, very much. We'll see you in the next session that will be announced in the following weeks. And on the meanwhile, have a great week. Okay. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.